To be competitive in the compact, luxury, and premium sedan segment, you have to do something that sets you apart. The hard part for Infiniti lately is figuring out exactly what that means for them. And it's clear these issues persist in a car like the 2022 Infiniti Q50. On paper, it all sounds pretty good, but when you experience it in person, the highs and lows are quickly made apparent. First off, I think it's a fine-looking machine. The nose sets off a great stance, the grille is nicely designed, there's some muscularity around the fenders, and the red paint on this model here looks great against the black trim. It's in the cabin where you start to notice that things are off. Infiniti still uses the oddball dual screen setup, where the upper screen has far worse resolution compared to the very slick lower screen. I will say though that integrating Apple CarPlay neatly across both is pretty cool. Still, the lower touchscreen doesn't seem to work so smoothly when I want to pause or change tracks. I can control it easily from the upper screen though if I want, and even better is the steering wheel controls. Also, these seats are great. They're very nicely bolstered and definitely super comfortable, but the steering wheel has a bit of a cheap tactile feel to it, though I will say that there's good room in both the front and rear rows, though on the other side, the trunk does leave a bit to be desired. Power, however, is one of the Q50's strong suits. At least specifically on this Q50 400 Red Sport version. Every version of the Q50 employs a twin turbocharged 3-liter V6, which pairs with a 7-speed automatic gearbox. The standard versions are 300 horsepower, while this Red Sport is juiced up to make 400 horsepower. And you can choose between rear-wheel drive and all-wheel drive as well. So with that exhaust tone out back, there's a bit of a boy racer aspect to this car, but not much. And if you pop the drive mode selector into standard, it feels like it's slightly quieter, but that could be my brain because I don't think it actually changes the exhaust in this car. What it does control is the engine responsiveness, the responsiveness of the gearbox, and the way the suspension is damped. Let's talk about the driving specifically here, because when you buy a sporty sedan, you're going to care about that, or at least I think you will. The steering on the Q50 is a bit mediocre. There's some weird tuning on center where it feels like it can't sit dead center. It needs to flop just to the left or just to the right. And once you realize that in your head, you can't stop thinking about it, and it's a bit odd. The weight is fine, even though it's clearly very artificial. Even though, you know, there's a lot of artificial feeling vehicles out there. I don't want to just dump on this car, but there's nothing exciting about the handling of this vehicle. The exciting bit happens when you put your foot to the floor, because this does have 400 horsepower. Really, it boils down to is that this is a good engine wrapped inside of a pretty decent looking vehicle that's just let down on the handling and the dynamics. There's nothing that makes this stand apart from anything else in its class. The gearbox is not some revelation sitting between you and your passenger. The drive modes aren't so drastically different that you're like, oh my God, now this is a monster machine. I mean, they're different, but it's not like, and again, this isn't supposed to be some beast, but it is the most high performance of the Q50 variants. And 400 horsepower is great, but I feel like I'm making excuses for a vehicle that I want to be better than it is. And then even worse is that this is the all-wheel drive version, and that saps all the fun, because the rear-wheel drive one is a bit more of a hoot because it's just a bit more engaging than this slightly neutered all-wheel drive version. Not everybody's gonna love the engine note. The VR does sound better than the VQs of days gone by. And if you're in this car, you're definitely gonna hear it, so you better get used to it and you better like it. But the VR on its own, stock, is just fine. That's really what it boils down to. Everything is fine. But is it maybe not so fine when we talk about price? Now, all that considered, the Infiniti Q50 doesn't fully fall into the luxury segment. Not fully. It's a premium machine, which means it should be priced accordingly, right? For the most part, yes, as the entry-level Luxe trim starts at $43,125 and comes nicely equipped with a 16-speaker sound system, leather, and all the safety bits. Climb to the mid-spec Sensory model and you're at $48,825, which adds a few more creature comforts. But to get to the Red Sport, you have to start at least $56,975. All-wheel drive on any model instantly bumps the price by $2,000. And the version you see here is more than $61,000. That's a ton of money, especially when you can get a 2022 Genesis G70 fully loaded for $55,000. And that's the 3.3T Launch Edition with all-wheel drive too, to keep the comparison even with this one. I'd spend less and get the non-launch rear-wheel drive. And then you have a car with a better driving experience and a better overall quality on the interior as well. And that's a problem for Infiniti, Genesis as a whole really. Everything they make is great in their segment and even a segment above. But there's good news on the horizon, at least when you look at what Infiniti's sister brand Nissan is doing right now. They're well into the process of turning the whole lineup around. And hopefully the good moves being made by Nissan translate to great moves for Infiniti down the road.